In his latest book, Conspiracy of One, Peter Rand tells the true story of Tyler Kent, a handsome young American diplomat who stole thousands of documents in a secret plot against FDR, Churchill, and the Allied war effort. Peter Rand is a writer, historian, and professor at Boston University and joins me now. It's great to have you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Who knew that Tyler Kent even existed? And you really stumbled upon him by accident.
Yeah, nobody knew he existed, and I just happened to be at Boston University in this special collection, and I found this trove of documents and papers that he had given to Boston University.
He himself had donated.
He had donated them to Boston University, to the special collections, for probably financial reasons, because he was down and out, living in Kerrville, Texas, and needed a little financial help. And so the head of the special collection helped him out and had these special secret papers.
Right, let's talk about Tyler Kent. He was a diplomat during World War II, or the start of World War II.
Well, he was a very minor functionary.
He was a clerk.
He was a clerk. He was the lowest possible person you could be.
So he's really not considered a diplomat, but he was part of the embassy.
He was
staff.
part of a very special embassy staff in Moscow, which was our first embassy to the Soviet Union, and then went to London, where he became a code clerk.
Which is where he really got in trouble.
That's where he got in trouble. And nobody knows quite why he was chosen to be a code clerk, because he'd never been a code clerk. He'd just been a clerk. But he was also a very handsome, very good looking, as you point out here, brilliant with languages kind of guy, with a chip on his shoulder, and also a kind of flawed personality.
Absolutely. That's the flawed personality is really what gets him into trouble. This is a guy who's a loner.
Yes, absolutely. He didn't have any friends, and he never did, because he grew up in the Foreign Service. His father was a consul, and they lived all over the world. So he never stayed anywhere long enough to make friends, and he always felt very aloof and never close to people. He was very attractive to women and had a lot of girlfriends.
A womanizer, absolutely.
A womanizer.
And a lot of people didn't like him, which is, of course, contributed to his downfall in the story. Okay, so how did he start doing what he was doing? Initially, he started bringing home work, he says, from work, so that he can look at it at home.
That's right. And in those days, particularly when he was in Moscow, you could do that because there was very little security in American embassies. In London, it was a slightly different story, and but he was really interested in these documents because he had, as I said, an axe to grind, and he wanted to photograph these documents that he thought showed that we were going to get into the war with Germany, and he was against that. So he took these papers home.
A lot of Americans were against getting into World War II.
Yes.
And so and he knew that. So there was a lot of secret exchanges between Churchill, who was Prime Minister of Great Britain at the time, and of course our President, FDR.
That's right. And that's the key historical meaning of this story in a way, because Churchill and Roosevelt were conducting a top secret, subversive conversation by telegram through the code room. So the only other person in the conversation was Tyler Kent. And he saw that actually what was happening was Churchill was lifting sanctions on American shipping in British waters, hoping that Roosevelt would give him some destroyers in exchange. Now, Roosevelt didn't do that, but Roosevelt was also basically breaking the Neutrality Act. He was breaking the law, which he was not at all afraid to do. Nobody knew this except Tyler Kent, and he thought, because he believed in the isolationist cause, he believed in keeping us out of the war, and he really felt intensely about this, he wanted to take it to Congress.
Well, what I found extremely fascinating was the conversation he had when they actually arrested him, or before he was arrested officially, with the ambassador of Great Britain at the time from the United States, Joseph Kennedy, who was a matriarch of the Kennedy family, and an investigator from MI5, I believe.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely.
And in that conversation, he really denied the fact he wasn't going to do anything with this paper. He didn't know that it had any implications.
He hadn't decided quite what he was going to do with them. He had shown some of those telegrams to one of Churchill's enemies in Parliament, and he was considering ways in which to get these to the Congress so that the isolationists could see that Roosevelt was really violating the Neutrality Act, among other things.
Well, had he not been caught What do you think would have happened?
I think it would have been catastrophic for Roosevelt, or it could have been, because at that time, as you know so well, only 50% of American people thought we should get involved in a war against Germany and Hitler. The other 50% were very, very vehemently opposed, and it was a turbulent, difficult time in this country when we were not at war and people did not want us to go to war.
Really quickly, though, Tyler Kent, would he be similar to our modern day whistleblower like Edward Snowden?
He would. In fact, that's one of the things that I think we can find valuable in this book, and I hope readers will understand this, that when they read this book, they're reading the story of somebody who behaved the way Snowden and Bradley Manning have behaved. Flawed, difficult people, loners, isolated types who actually were fervently acting in the belief that the American people were not being shown things that they should know about.
All right. The name of the book again is Conspiracy of One. Peter, thank you. Fascinating read. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Great.
And coming up next, Taylor Greenberg shares a healthy summer burger recipe. But first, take a look at this.